Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you. It is week number 5 and what I call my reviews at midnight. And this week I bring you Ghosthouse from 1988. It's an Umberto Lenzi film, otherwise marketed in Italy as La Casa 3. Now when I did my video earlier today for why I'm region free, I did make slightly a slight mistake, and I wanted to clear it up as we roll into this. When I talked about La Casa 3 in that video, I don't think I was as clear as I need to be now. In Italy, La Casa is the house. So what you have here is Sam Raimi has Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. This is before Army of Darkness comes out, and so when Lenzi does Ghosthouse, it'll be marketed to capitalize on the success of the Evil Dead franchise, well, as it is then. This is before Army of Darkness. And they will call Evil Dead La Casa, and then Evil Dead 2 La Casa 2. And so, of course, Ghosthouse will be marketed as La Casa 3. Figure anyone who's seen the first 2 Evil Dead movies are going to want to see Ghosthouse, and then they'll keep it up with La Casa 4, which is witchery, and La Casa 5, which I do believe is the horror show. All totally different movies, have nothing to do with one another. It's just marketing and ways of making money. But we get into Ghosthouse here, of course, La Casa 3, or as I grew up with it when I was a kid and renting VHS tapes from the video store. This really was like a segue into horror for me, or Italian horror. I remember renting this on videotape back in the day, and I don't quite see this film the same today as I did back then. I mean, it was like we talk about gateway drugs or whatever, but this was like a segue or gateway into horror, Italian horror for me. And so how I perceived this film as a kid is really, not how I see it today. It is a bit cheesy. It is not Lenzi's best film by any stretch. He's probably most notably known for Nightmare City, which is a great film. But Ghosthouse, really, it is Umberto Lenzi and Laura Wendel, who plays Martha, and Greg Rhodes plays Paul Rogers, Mary Sellers plays Susan, and Ron Houck plays Mark. Now, I know Laura Wendel most recently from Zombie 5, Killing Birds, and I knew she looked familiar when the film started as I was rewatching it tonight. And Mary Sellers, though, of course, from Stage Fright fame, which, of course, was the first movie I reviewed for my reviews at midnight. And then there's a few other connections to Stage Fright, actually. Not only Mary Sellers, but this is a Film Mirage production, which is, of course, Stage Fright as well. And the guy behind that, of course, is Joe D'Amato, which he remains uncredited for this film. Not sure exactly why, although if you read just a tiny bit, he wasn't too thrilled with it and just wanted to, stay off. It's not that bad of a film. I mean, I guess depending on if you're Joe D'Amato and what you thought the final product was going to be, maybe. But looking at it now and even all these years later, it's not that bad. What you really have here is a house, and it's the same house that Lucio Fulci filmed his House by the Cemetery back in 81, I think. This is an 88 film. But back in 81, when Lucio Fulci did that film and used this house, that movie is clearly superior film to this one. This film has a lot of inherent problems in terms of the writing, there being a lack of coherency with the story as it's being given. But at the core of it is kind of a creepy tale about a house that really what you basically have here is you have a scene that sets up the film and then a jump, like a 20-year jump ahead, right? In that opening scene, you're really introduced to the mom and dad who live there and the little girl, Henrietta, who's 11, I think. And dad is like the director of the local funeral home. And he has a bad habit of taking stuff out of coffins, keeping it for himself, or like this doll that will be the centerpiece of this film. he takes his doll out of this little girl's coffin and gives it to his own daughter as a gift. It's pretty twisted. But without really knowing that, the guy really still comes across as demented at the beginning, because he goes downstairs into the basement looking for his daughter, and he finds a dead cat, and he just assumes his daughter killed the cat since she's sitting down in there in the basement with scissors in her hands, bloodied scissors. But what he doesn't realize is with the theft of this doll, he's basically brought this demon, I guess, into the home, who is taking hold of his daughter and starts doing things, and he doesn't really have any understanding of what's going on, but in very quick order, he will be killed and his wife will be killed by those spirits, or spirit that is in the house, and that will sort of lay the groundwork for a 20-year jump, where basically you got this guy who's a shortwave radio ham operator, and he basically intercepts what he thinks is either like a distress call or something to that effect. He hears somebody screaming on the other end, and basically he thinks this murder has been committed. So him and his girlfriend, in quick order, and this is, you got to take a leap here with your imagination, but using his computer, of course, this is 1988, right? He's able to somehow hone in where the origin of the signal is, and of course, they live in Boston, takes him outside of Boston to this little New England town, and they find the source, this abandoned home, where this other group of people just happen to be hanging out because it's empty. They're on vacation, and they just happen to come by where this abandoned house is and thought they could take up some minor residence. And of course, when the other two arrive, all this stuff just starts going down. And, once one Italian set piece after another of some practical gore effects, which, some are actually pretty good. You do have the story of the little girl, and it somewhat becomes a mystery, past the midpoint on your way to the end, where they're desperately trying to figure out what is the cause of all this supernatural things going on, and it will rush to its climax. Now, my thoughts, I grew up with this as a kid. I rented it. I remember being really infatuated and falling in love with, I didn't really understand Italian cinema. I had Fangoria, and I was reading Fangoria as a kid, and I was learning, and I was being introduced to like Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci and Bruno Mattei and some of these other guys. And I was falling into the Italian horror trap, and not really so much a trap, it's kind of a nice place to be, actually. But, looking at it all these years later, and I still watch it. I have this is the Italian edition, actually, before Scream Factory picked it up and gave it a sort of a dual release with Witchery on Blu-ray here domestically in this country. I actually picked this up from Amazon Italy, and it's in Italian, so I had the film, but I could only watch it in Italian, at least until the US or Scream Factory picked it up and released it, and then I picked it up, and now I can enjoy the film in English. But I do appreciate the whole La Casa 3, the marketing. It is Italian, it's just an Italian thing. But it's I think the thing that irritates me the most in this movie, perhaps, it isn't the cheesiness or the incoherency of the writing. Some of the plot structure just doesn't follow the way it ought to. Is the hijacking of elements of of Simon Boswell's composition from Stage Fright, and that music is integrated into this film. And for someone like me who loves Stage Fright as much as I love Stage Fright, to hear this music incorporated, not this music per se, but the Stage Fright music in the midst of different pieces of the film, it's so awkward, because the minute that music kicks in, all I think of is Stage Fright, and makes me want to watch Stage Fright and stop watching this. And it's those kinds of things that happen. Now, this is it's a cheap way of getting the soundtrack or the composition together to put some music score to it. And I wish they would have just paid the few extra bucks and just had a natural music piece just for this film, but they had to hijack from other places. And so, I mean, you know, that's awkward. Just some of the, just the incoherency. The actors and actresses, I mean, it is, you're not going to get much more than you get here from this film. It's, as I said, this is not Lenzi's best effort. But if you're new to Italian cinema, it is a pretty decent, it's a fun movie. If you just treat it for what it is, it's just kind of a haunted house type movie that never really gets that graphic. I mean, we're not talking Lucio Fulci and City of the Living Dead here. I mean, this never quite gets that far. And it is a little bit of creepy. It has one of the, this doll in this film, I think is way creepier than the doll in Poltergeist. And the music that accompanies the doll is pretty creepy as well. And the whole idea of a ham operator intercepting this sort of foreshadowed, what appears to be a murder happening via shortwave radio is an intriguing thought. You know, this is one of those movies that perhaps begs to be remade, but remade by a studio that's not afraid to pour some money into it, but to get a young guy or a guy who just, or a gal, somebody who loves Italian cinema and wants to pay their respect to Italian cinema by really pouring themselves into just an updated remake or reimagining of this, or whatever you might call it, and just really just have fun. And kind of like We Are Still Here was a love letter to Fulci. This begs for someone to, you know, write their own love letter to Fulci or Italian cinema in general, and remake this thing, but really, you know, kind of make something that harkens back to the era of drive-in cinema or something. Anyways, so Ghosthouse, La Casa 3. You know, Italian cinema not at its best, but I don't think it's at its worst either. You could do a lot more damage to yourself, you know, by watching something other than Ghosthouse. It's not a bad movie, and it does sort of get you into Italian cinema in a kind of a fun way. So, Lenzi, Ghosthouse, 1988. Of course, this is Rob from Georgia, and these are my reviews at midnight. And I'll leave you there with that. And as always, we end these things with go